Buonasera, welcome, dobar dan, buenos dias, bienvenue. Good to have everyone here today. We are here for the second session of our conversations and reflections on the Synod of October 2023 and what is calling us forward. So I'm going to begin by inviting our Executive Secretary, Sister Patricia Murray, to just offer a brief word of welcome to you. Sister Pat?
Thank you very much, Maria, and welcome to everybody, whether you're in Delhi or Dublin or in Ohio or wherever. It's good to gather again for the second session. And I think we're being invited in our synodal journey, now that we have the synthesis text, to go deeper, to read it and reflect on it at a personal level, and also to share it with others. Because as Pope Francis says to us, the experience of being synod is important as we journey into the future. So how can we collaborate within the church in the mission of the church and the mission of God? So can we keep the synodal mission and invitation alive? Can we reflect on matters that are important for the church in our area, wherever we are at this time? And can we together engage in conversations in the spirit in a way that deepens our relationships one with the other? So I think we're at a very important moment in the life of the church, in the life of religious life, and in the life of lay people. And more we've been asked for this collaboration. So it's lovely to see different lay people here with us today on this webinar. So we look forward to hearing some of the points in which we might deepen ourselves, move forward together, and identify where in our parishes, in our diocese, and wherever we're located, that we can contribute to the synodal journey. So my words of welcome are to say thank you for being with us, and we look forward to this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sister Pat. Last week we were blessed with 5 of the UISG Synod delegates speaking to their experience of the Synod, the content of the Synod, and some of the implications for consecrated life today. And there was a real richness in what was offered and what was invited. You and your small groups also reflected that richness. And at the end of the small groups, we invited you in the chat to simply write a word or phrase that you're left with from this gathering. And that's what we'll begin with a visual of that will be part of our opening prayer. And so I'm just going to share the screen. These were the words, phrases that came up again and again in different languages. And I'm just going to, for 2 minutes, as our way of steeping into a listening space, invite you to see what's coming forth for you in this, both as an Advent time, as an Advent also in religious life, and an awaiting time also in the church. So just to listen with the music and just maybe find one of these words or two, or to just slowly look through them. This will be our prayer. know ourselves to be a church walking together and the people of God called to walk together. We pray that the depths of this call in this time of synodality may permeate us and our communities, our parishes, our institutions. Come, Lord Jesus, come. Amen. Last week, we looked at people's experiences of the Synod and the different elements of it. This session, we're looking at the document that has come out, the synthesis report, which you were invited if you had an opportunity to read it, or at least begin to read it, but also then the implications of this for missionary discipleship. That will be part of it. The good news of this moment that we happen to all of us here together be online is that we've also received news about the next steps that the church is being called to and various groups and ways to engage it. So we have a double blessing in this time of having opportunities to speak about that. There is a change in our program for today. Unfortunately, Dr. Anna Rowlands ended up being sick, very sick. I don't know about your part of the world, but I know a number of people in parts of Europe that have caught the winter flu, the winter bug, and she really offers her sorrow in not being able to join us. And yet I said, there will be another moment, trust us. But I invite you to pray for Anna and her healing. She really has no voice with which to speak at this point. And we all know getting your health in order is important. So our brother, Father Giacomo Costa, our Jesuit brother, was kind enough to say upon being asked, could you offer us, in addition to your reflection on missionary discipleship, as this document is inviting us to, could you also just do a brief overview, not a long overview, but a brief overview of the Synod synthesis document, and then speak to the missionary discipleship and dimensions of this. And then we will also have an opportunity to have some time with him to say, what is it we're being asked as a church community and in different groups as we go forward in the next several months before the next Synod Assembly. So to my brother, I'm so grateful for your generosity. Giacomo Costa is a Jesuit, and he's the president of the Fondazione Culturale San Fedele di Milano. And he's also the special secretary for the Synod of Bishops, for the Synod on Synodality here. And so really spends a lot of his time working with the details that are going into the Synod preparation, but also the conversations. And so I could think of no better person to give us this orientation right now. And so there are many things you could find out about him online, but I'm simply going to say we're so grateful, Giacomo, that you're able to be with us and to share. And we will have Giacomo sharing, and we'll see about a few questions. And then we also specifically said we will in this session give a larger amount of time to what was one of the key points of the gathering we had for a month in Rome for the Synod, and that was conversation in the Spirit as the way. And so we're giving extra time in this, and we'll offer you some questions for that reflection that then we really need your responses to. So without further ado, Giacomo, welcome.
Thank you very much. Grazie, merci, e buongiorno a tutte e tutti.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to speak in Italian, even to, alternate our languages during our webinars. I'm sorry because many people will speak in English, but I will speak in Italian, and you will be able to follow me with translation. you really reminded me about the Synod, and seeing Sister Margaret here together with us is really something that moved me a lot. And even remembering about the Synod on the Amazon, I was also very moved. All your reflections, and being here together with this climate, with this church, is really moving. And I'm very sorry for Sister Anne Roland not to be here with us, because she was part of the Synod and she was part of our choir. And it is useful to have many people talking, not having just one person speaking, because you can understand the various points of view and the various views. And this is the harmony that we are invited to by Pope Francis. And this is an harmony which is spirit guided. My presentation will focus on what I needed to present, and so with the synthesis document, I wanted to focus on 4 nucleum. The first, the Synod report concerning to the lived experience, to also create a bridge with a beautiful reports that we listened to last week. I was here during the meeting and it was really interesting. And the synthesis document, the synthesis report, is strongly linked to these experiences. Secondly, I would like to focus on the structure and the gender of this report, what it expresses and what it focuses on. So we will have an overview of the report. And thirdly, some specific contents that help us entering this point of view, which is radically missionary. Our reflection is never self-referential in the church, but it is rather an overall reflection to encourage and to embrace the call to bear witness to the gospel in the world. So we will not talk abstractly on synodality, but to have a really synodal church, what are the elements that are necessary? If we have time and if we will have questions, we will also talk about the next steps from the synthesis report for the future. This is just a starting point, and we will reflect on how we will move forward in the future. These are the 4 points on which I would like to work with you. But now, before that, I would like to ask you to stream 50 seconds of pictures from the Synod to reconnect and to remember what we were told about last week, and to enter this document concerning this beautiful experience. So here we are.
Spirito Santo.
Ecco, grazie mille.
So we are here back. So thank you very much. But these pictures can really echo the experiences that we listened to last week. So I would like to start with my first point, how the synthesis report cannot be understood outside of this lived experience, or at least without linking it to the lived experience of the Synod. Many observations and criticisms were received by those who just consider this report as a document that refers and analyzes some points, whereas this report really refers to the fruits of this lived experience of the synod, which is part of a process. To this end, it would be barely incomprehensible if we didn't put it in this point of view, particularly focusing on two very important aspects. The fact that it is the fruit of an assembly which is not a parliament or a simple meeting, but it is rather the fruit of a liturgical assembly, a liturgical occasion in which God made himself present among us and called us to embrace increasingly authentic forms and strategies of reconciliation, discernment, and mission. This dimension of prayer is crucial, and the video ended on this picture, God at the center, and this is the very perspective from which the text was drafted. One of the experiences that was related by one of the brothers from the synod was the synod has, I lived it, tries to train participants to consider synodality as a contemplative way of being. So if we take these words as just a reflection or a political view, and so a sort of mediation between various opinions, we cannot understand the synod. Instead, it is a path in which we aim at creating new paths in prayer, and the other dimension to be taken into account is that of growing up as one body, feeling the body of the church being alive and realizing the hardship in facing the various experiences in the church. This was an incredible and awesome discovery also for many bishops, because there are many ways of being church that are completely different from ours in different contexts, in different areas. So the first stage was growing up together with the Lord and growing up in relationships. Without these steps, it is fairly meaningless to endeavor in this mission. It is not just about confronting and reflecting on various opinions in our already polarized church. In this sense, as we read at the beginning, there is an experience that no document can really describe, because this was a lived experience. And so it is important, by reading the text, to remember that this is part of a lived experience, and so it mirrors a stage in a specific path of discernment. It is not a final document. It is not a closed document. This is very important to remember. Also to link to the conversations in the spirit that we carried out. This is essential if we want to be a truly synodal church. And this is something that is really mirrored in the document. It is also the ground of this document. Secondly, as for the gender and the structure of this document, we can say that it has more or less 40 pages. It is a 40 pages long document. And it has some natural ones, and it was really developed in a progressive way, even though the time on which we worked on it was not very long, and even the need of including all participants and being represented in the document was really hard because there were at least 1,000 amendments to this document. And this actually hardened the document and caused some steps back. But this is really the fruit of the work of people and participants in the synod. So again, this is not just a document of the church. This is a text that expresses the listening that we carried out. And I believe it helps creating trust to develop in all human beings. And based on this very new document, we can say that this is the fruit of a synthesis work that we carried out together at the very point in which we were working. And so you will find 20 chapters. We will talk about it extensively afterwards. There are 20 issues, 20 nucleus that were worked on. Each of them has its agreements, issues to be dealt with, and conclusions. So apart from the instrumentum laboris, we worked on what we agreed upon, on the questions that arose in us and that we wanted to further develop, and some further proposals. So each of the 20 chapters has this subdivision in 3 parts: agreements, issues, and proposals. So on some points, we need to still work, and this is something that we agreed upon because we voted on them. But there are also some milestones on which to work. The consultation will not start from the very beginning, but there are still some other issues that we need to theologically, pastorally, canonically, and scientifically work. We will need to have some further time. And since we work in a synodal way, we need to work together. And there are also other paths and other objectives that we need to identify. We wanted to first pinpoint the obstacles and hardships in our past, and we reflected on how to move forward in this path. For each chapter, we will find agreements, issues, and proposals, and we never aimed at creating compromises between the various opinions or creating a mixed document in which all opinions were partly or integrally included. We just wanted to describe the real agreements and the real issues that had emerged. So our aim is not diplomacy. Recently, there has been the COP28 going on, and here you can see diplomacy, but we didn't want to be diplomatic. We just wanted to include all voices in a climate and atmosphere of trust as a church that together aims to understand what God calls us to. This was the synodal methodology and the path that guided us, which also bears witness to our way of working all over the world in diversity, in unfolding our perspectives on synodality. We try to describe some important issues and to identify the necessary steps so that there will not be winners or losers, but today we can all enrich our discussion. So these 20 chapters refer all together in the most honest way possible to the fruits of the discussion we lived as a church in the midst of the differences that characterize us. I believe the Synod was really an occasion in which not only we were able to all give our inputs and then play it on their mobile phone, just a joke, but we really all tried and commit ourselves to deeply listen to one another, realizing and discussing in the church about the fact that we are all linked together by the same faith, by the very same faith, also brings us to have, causes us to have different opinions. In these 20 chapters, you will also find a distinction that was made afterwards, and also subdivision in three different parts. The first is called the face of the Synodal Church. This is not a document again, but these are just some chapters concerning this experience, the experience of synodality. We will see afterwards. And that also refer to what is the basis of the Synodal Church, what we understand as Synodal Church, how can we grow in the understanding of a Synodal Church. And the Instrumentum Laboris had described the characteristics of a Synodal Church, and then we will see how there is actually a richness and depth, which is the fruit of a reflection that in the past we couldn't even imagine. The second part is called Gathered and Sent by the Trinity, talking about all who are part of the missionary church. And the dimension of the mission is crucial in this document. And in this path of the people of God, we need to try and highlight the richness of the dimension of the mission for the kingdom of God. So the second nucleus refers to the protagonists and characters of this mission. The third part refers to weaving relationships and creating communities. We are not referring to all missionary disciples, but to the dynamics and networks and processes that we need to focus on and that enable us to work as and grow as a synodal church. And even as churches dialoguing in the world at the service of the gospel. So the first part is referring to the understanding of synodality, the second one concerning the protagonists, and the third one concerning the dynamics. So this is not, again, a document or an analysis, a perfect analysis. This is just a list of the issues that emerged and that were progressively described based on the various points of view. The most important element was identifying the issues that make us grow as a synodal church and not just having a beautiful presentation. If you want, you can find a document of the International Theological Commission that beautifully presented synodality in the mission and life of the church, and there you may find a beautiful argumentation. But here we just want to understand what is needed from a practical point of view to grow as a church and to make these words bear fruit in the life of the church. This is the beautiful part. This is the way in which we can revitalize the Second Vatican Council and even the Evangelii Gaudium in order to make this apparently rhetorical expression, the church going out, the pastoral and missionary dimensions, these expressions risk just being slogans, but they actually imply a profound conversion. So these 20 points, these 20 chapters are really the cornerstones on which to work and to which we are called to work on. And now we will move to the third part of my presentation, which is the core of these 20 issues, these three parts of the document. In order to grasp its richness, so the first point refers to synodality, experiences, and comprehension. So this is just an introduction in which, even if you reread together our lived experiences, we realized something. So on the one hand, what we lived in the synodal path in its depth and richness needs to be encouraged and further developed, and we hope others in the church to live the same experience. And it points out a relational, dynamic, and missionary church in which, as a matter of fact, what really matters are not the structures, are not power. This was the church that the youth, during the Synod of the Youth, presented us with. And so, synodal and synodality, in the end, help us to move on in this experience of listening and recognizing the dignity of every baptized person. But it was also our filter, but even an obstacle, because it sometimes was considered as an abstract word, an abstract term that is very far from our personal vocabulary, a term that even many Catholics do not understand. So on the one hand, we must not just focus on the label of synodality or synodal. The risk of labeling everything as synodal would actually risk killing synodality. There is a beautiful experience for the church, and we hope this experience of the church working together to announce the gospel may be carried out and put forward. And at the theological level, we need to clarify the meaning of synodality and synodal, because even based on the various traditions, it is understood in a different way. Eastern churches understand it in a specific way, which is not the same as ours. So we need to be very careful in using it and taking steps in this perspective. Even though we can find actually a definition, synodality as walking together with Christ for the mission, gathering at the various levels of the church with mutual listening, community discernment, creation of consensus as the expression of the dynamic and living tradition in the church. So this is a very short definition, which is to be found in the first point. But again, I would like to highlight that it is important to enter this experience. Everybody said that up until you don't live this experience, you can't understand it. At the same time, theologically, we need to specify the meaning of this term. This is the very introduction to our framework, and it is very important for us to clarify it if we want to move forward. Then, gathered and sent by the Trinity. What is the point here? So, not only from a theological point of view, but even in the light of the church, we run the risk of highlighting the Christological element, the relationship with Christ, the Word of God, the norm, traditions, magisterium, and so on, or the spirit, discernment, our life and dialogue walking together. So the key point here is that we need to find ecclesial ways that do not privilege just one of these points, but keeping this expression alive, where we focus between the relationship with Christ and with the Spirit. If we want to learn to be a synodal church, we cannot just say, well, the Spirit will help us, we will listen to the Spirit, or just say, well, we need to refer to the norms, to the traditions of the church, and so on and so forth. We need to deeply develop these dimensions and integrate in an intellectual and emotional dimension of faith. This richness can really help a synodal church thrive. What's more, these are all issues, again, on which we can discuss. In order to enter a synodal church, the experience of the Christian initiation is crucial. This path, this entering with baptism, the church, in recognizing our dignity as sons and daughters of the same Father with the very same mission, with the Eucharist, with the confirmation that helps us develop our vocation. This is the very key to enter the church and the meaning of our formation. It is important that this formation and initiation be rethought and revalued in a vocational way, meaning that each of us needs not to just be a passive user of our vocation, but we need to recognize our specific vocation in our baptism, but even at the service of the mission. This is what we mean by entering the church. We need to all walk our path until we recognize the originality of our path in the church's community. And this is a path that cannot just end with the sacraments, but it needs to develop in our formation for people who can realize not just all of a sudden or with a ritual, but be aware of their baptism as a way of discovering their vocation. Then, moving on, people in poverty as protagonists of the church's journey. So, people living in poverty as protagonists of the church's journey, because in walking together, we cannot understand its meaning if everybody is involved in this path, particularly those who are marginalized. So the relationship with people in poverty is another issue for formation in a church in which we understand what it means to walk together. This was one of the issues that involved me the most, because we really understood how we theoretically know how to involve people in poverty, but from a practical point of view, this is very hard for us. And when we discussed about this, we really run the risk of being rhetorical, whereas it is really an area in which we need to grow and learn. It is not a question of rhetoric, putting people in poverty at the center of the church. We need to learn from their suffering, from their way of knowing suffering Christ. And in this way, a sentence from the synthesis report really made me reflect. In some areas of the church is poor, with the poor, for the poor. And in some parts of the world, it is not really a stab in our back, because it is true. Not all churches are able to be poor with the poor for the poor, but we are called to do that, and we are called to grow and be converted. As in the next point, which, as you can see, these are all places where we are called to learn. A church out of every tribe, tongue, people, and nation. More and more we live in multicultural and multi-religious contexts. Just think about migrants and the difficulties of churches being poor and welcoming migrants. And this is a really delicate point, but this makes us realize how we are a really Western church. And the conversations in the Synod helped us to go out of a specific way of expression and enable some new communication strategies that helped us to give our own contribution to the discussion. We strongly recognize the differences existing in the church, and here the key issue is the search, the pursuit between the balance of the church at the local level and its universal dimensions. So how can we work together on the one hand, but also respecting the various cultures, the way of living, liturgy and faith, and the fact that the risk of modernization may actually stop the action of the church. These are all experiences that may help us grow as a synodal church in recognizing the importance of preserving unity, but also being rooted at the local level with differences, with the beautiful differences in the church. And the same goes for the next chapter, the Eastern churches and the Latin church traditions. I am now in Milan in the Chiesa Ambrosiana, which has no Roman rite and no Latin rite. There is a richness in rites and rituals to celebrate faith. And these are not elements that are just part of a beautiful ideal museum. This is not our aim. We are just called to realize of how the Catholic Church is made up of these very traditions. And the last point, again, the part of the ecumenical church, we can find here at number 7 on the road towards Christian unity, the need to walk together with other Christian churches and communities. And here a strong elements emerged, something that was really hard for us, but deserves being analyzed. How all Christians participate in sensum fidei and how all needs to be carefully listened to. These are very strong sentences, you know, and needs careful consideration also concerning repentance and conversion. If we want to grow and understand what it really means to be a synodal church, we can't do away with all these dimensions: personal conversion, listening to all people involved in the path, including the marginalized, including all the traditions of the church, and the path towards Christian unity. So the first nucleus of the topics, but you can really see these are pivotal topics, have this kind of orientation. In the second part, we will be very fast here, and we will have a look at these issues in the phase of dialogue. All disciples of missionaries, part number 2. We are all called to learn from the Lord and to be at his service. We are all sent by him in the world. And this is the vision of our church. The first point is the core one, which is Church is Mission. The first title and it is very worth mentioning. We also said that during the discussion, this was actually a mixed point. The mission has a church. It means that we are at the service of announcing the gospel, and we are not called to recreate the church in its structures. The mission is the cornerstone of the church, through which we need to understand the whole process of working and growing together as a synodal church. In bearing witness to the mystery of the Lumen Gentium, in which all human beings are represented, the mystery of the church, which actually exceeds it, helps us to understand the life of the church in this missionary perspective. Our horizon is not that of our national borders or community borders, but that of bearing witness to the gospel worldwide. This helps us to also rethink our structures and institutions, and I hope we will be able, with UISG, to deepen the analysis of the history of women in the mission of the church, a dimension which is quite far from being lived, but it must not be limited to just the women question, women issue, but needs to be addressed as a dimension of a missionary people called to give her own contribution to the church. This actually links us to patriarchy, to hierarchies, to elements that continue preventing this witness worldwide for women and for their contribution. And it is a pity that Anna is not here with us, because she could have given us her opinions and her lived experience concerning this topic. Then we will move very fast and we can see the chapter concerning consecrated life. And among the actors involved in consecrated life in the church, we can understand how mutua relazione is now an outdated document. We need to understand how the charism and movements are still part of the church. We discussed a lot concerning religious people that feel absorbed or abused by bishops, and there are instead other communities working separately from their dioceses. Then we can find deacons and priests in a synodal church with deep gratitude, with that gratitude that we express for the priests that represent one of the most delicate members that find it very hard to embrace the synodal perspective. It is very important to remember that the basic deaconship relates to our service, and this leads us to a new understanding of the church after the years from the Second Vatican Council. We have been needing to rethink and re-understand this dimension of the clericalization of deacons and even their function and the possibility to enter deaconship for women. So there is a whole dimension of re-understanding of deacons, of the role of deacons on the one hand, and of the ministries, of the ordained ministries on the other, because they are specific realities, but in it we're all people of God at the service of the world. Important is also the dimension of transparency and the culture of accountability. This is something that we all agreed upon with great consensus. We need to be used to a dialogue. There is not one person deciding, there is circularity. There are people making decisions in a path of transparency and accountability in which we grow together as a community. And this is true also for bishops. It is important to have a leadership that is not put at the center, but it is at the service of a missionary church. And this goes also for the bishops of Rome and for the various churches, the ways in which the ministries are developed mirrors the way in which responsibilities are shaped and subdivided, and how we understand leadership in unity and diversity. This is also another important point. All actors need to be re-understood as missionaries and disciples. Our mission is not just what we live in our parishes, but the bearing witness to the gospel. There are many lay people doing that, and it is important that we also work with them. This is not the pivotal point. The pivotal point is to announce Christ in the world, and all communities are at the service of announcing the gospel of in the family life, in institutions, and so on. This perspective needs to change the way in which we understand the contribution of every human being in the life of the church, in the light of this mission. And in the third part, also in our structures. We also talked about integral formation, and this was one of the crucial points. We strongly feel the need of formation to live as a synodal church, not only as facilitators, but also not to create a new elite of facilitators. We need to be church in listening. In order to do that, we need to be trained. We need to talk about controversial issues to accompany people and who needs to be accompanied. And in this mission, which is probably the least understood and embraced part of this synthesis report because it is too prophetic, being missionary in the digital world, which is not really an area of mission, but it means being witnesses to the gospel in the digital environment. It is not very easy to do that, but we need to accompany and train missionaries that are able to work in our current world. And the same goes also for the structures for participations. We are not just talking here about obligations or self-referential issues, but having structures that are at the service and that are present for the church to be working at the local level. For example, pastoral councils are not the representatives of choirs or associations in the pastoral community, but they are made up of lay men and women that work in the parish and are able to understand the problems and to work with nurses and teachers, helping the parish to develop in its world. They are also trained in order to carry out this mission, and on the other end, they help also others to develop their missions. And as for the last couple of topics, the structures and groupings of churches within the communion of the whole church, the synodal dimension is to be lived not only in the vocation, in the individual vocation, but even in the various churches. So what is the role of a bishop conference? How can a culture and groupings of churches may carry out their functions of the magisterium? Second, from Africa, asked for a reflection on polygamy. which actually has some specific characteristics that refer to the African church. And if they will not start this discussion, nobody will. And so it is important that each of us starts its own discussions. And even in this communion, in this path together, we also need to take into account the role of the synod. And here comes the hardest question and the most debated one. If the assemblies need to involve only bishops or members of consecrated life, if lay people may be included, here we are faced with churches' experiences which are very diverse. And here we must not just reflect on the existing structures of the church, but understand how together we can respond to this call to be a church in mission in the world that makes Jesus being present among us and that recognizes the signs of the Spirit worldwide. I believe I can now stop with it. Now, if you have questions or doubts, we will be able together to discuss about these elements. And the very question of the synthesis report is, and so what? How can we move forward? This is the key question that we need to understand. And the key issue that the Secretariat of the Synod actually exposed us with yesterday. But these are the starting points, the questions that emerge as they are with the issues that we understood, that were shared, and with the issues that you saw are not theoretical, but rather very practical issues to be developed from a church that wants to be at the service of the mission with Christ that helps her to announce the gospel.
Thank you so much. Before I say anything further, let's just allow for 2 minutes for each of us to just soak in and maybe ponder what words, what's coming forth from you, as Giacomo has brought up the whole topic of the church asking itself, who are we? What are we called? What are the topics? And then what's also resonating in light of our baptismal calls and vocations that we have. But just 2 minutes of silence to soak this in. we will shortly be going into the conversation in the spirit with a few more questions, and some we're literally going to ask you for assistance with. But I'm asking Giacomo if you would just offer maybe 2-3 minutes max. Some people already know this, but yesterday there was a press release looking and inviting the entire church to the next steps of our synodal journey. So people have been asking and say, what next? What does this mean? And it's available on synod.va in multiple languages, but it gives some directions both for our bishops' conferences and the diocese, but also the local church, and invites religious life and all forms of life to look, to choose some areas that are really maybe part of your cultural experience or something that you really bring to this. And it's not going back to where we were 2 years ago and listening at the same level. It's listening in light of what we have in the synthesis report. But this is available for everyone. It's also, there's a press release on it. But Giacomo, might you just offer a few words on what is the Synod office and the church inviting us to right now in this, and maybe even some reflection questions, but just briefly, because we want people to read it, and we can actually do more on this in 2024, but I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Sì, bene, rapidamente proprio.
Well, just rapidly, with few words, this is actually the right complement to what we said. Well, this is really what we said. So what is going on now? There are 3 main guidelines if we want to simplify. The first one is there are some underlying questions about which I told you, for which we realize that we need a level of deep analysis which would be unrealistic to deal them with in the coming months or in the 3 weeks of the Synod Assembly. So according to the dynamics that are proper to the Synod, which is a consultative body for the Pope, we will present him with these questions and will ask him how does he want us to proceed? There are questions concerning the ratio fundamentalis of the formation for the ministries, mutuae relationes, the analysis concerning deacons, the access to women deacons, and so on and so forth. So these topics will be listed, and based on the synthesis report, we will give this list to the Holy Father. We will ask him what we want to focus on in a synodal way, because he said that what really matters is a synodal strategy. So involving experts worldwide and even dicasteries, we will reflect on this topic. So first and foremost, we will have these issues to be deeply analyzed. And during the second session, we will have a report concerning the work on these topics so that we may move forward in our work. Then afterwards, for local churches and bishop conferences, there are 2 guidelines, one concerning deep analysis and the other one concerning the growth in the synodal dynamic. As for the first one, there is a question concerning how to be a synodal church in mission. So this question of how concretely being a synodal church, what our insights, what are the tools to be developed to be a synodal church, with 2 sub-questions. At the local level, how can we value the principle of co-responsibility in the mission of all the people of God? What kind of ministries, what kind of dynamics can we promote? So we are referring to the central chapters of the synthesis report. How can we value co-responsibility at the local level? And then how to find a balance between the church as a whole, the living at the local level, at the level of the universal church in relationship with local churches. So these topics must not be understood as mere self-referential topics, but in the view of the Evangelii Gaudium 27. This is the reference, this is the missionary dream that we must aspire to. So how can we grow as a missionary church, and how can our relationships be missionary and not self-referential? Just to sum up. Then point number 3, keeping and make this experience flourish. This is crucial for a relational church. For a dialogue in church, we need to still continue involving the whole people of God, fostering formation, fostering the consultation of the poor, involving poor people, involving marginalized. So how can we grow as a synodal church? As for the first point, we will have a consultation and then a synthesis report. And on these topics, every church is asked to develop a best practice, and then all best practices will be collected and presented. But the topic of the second session will focus on a deeper analysis. So there are the big issues, the big questions, a deeper analysis between co-responsibility, accountability, vocations, and ministries, from the Pope to the bishops. And we will also further explore the possibility of living this experience of the Synodal Church, an experience without which we can't even understand what we are talking about. So this is the work that awaits us, and it is not just starting consultations anew, but we want to find people helping us to deepen this analysis, and we deeply need the contribution of the human sciences, social sciences, theology, and canon law. This cannot happen if we don't continue working on the synodal dynamics and dynamism of a church that in its ordinary life listens to people and engages in evangelization. Thank you.
Thank you, Giacomo. I think this is one of the first places where we are naming the next steps publicly as a church. And as Sister Pat said, we have people in consecrated life here. We have people married, single, all forms of vocation. And this next section is really inviting people. So please read it as your Advent reflection and call to deepening, because those 3 sections are saying, how do we deepen the reflection? How do we engage these questions further and keep this dynamic that's been moving going forth? And so we will be inviting you to go to your local churches, either create spaces for conversation, equally, it would be great to bring your energy for this conversation in a synodal church to your parishes, to your ministries, to the places where we reflect and pray anyway. So it's an invitation. What I'd like to do right now is just before we go into the small groups, and I think most of you have put your EN or ES or FR or IT. If you haven't, this is the moment to just invite you to ponder 2 questions, right? And the first question is, what has stirred within you as you've been listening? What's resonated in your own heart? What's stirring questions for you? What's happening to you in this? So just what's stirring within you and moving within you as you've been listening. And the second is, What do you sense religious life might be called to offer in this time? Or whatever vocation that you are in. But one is, what stirred within you as you were listening? And second, do you have a sense of what consecrated life can offer to this and is called by the Spirit to offer in this time? Everything is related to our faith and the Spirit inviting us. What moved in you? What was the Spirit saying to you as you listen? And what do you sense the Spirit is inviting us to as consecrated life to offer? So just 2 minutes of just 3 minutes of just silence, and then we'll move you into your groups. We will be using the same method that we've used if you have been in some of our earlier sessions of conversation in the Spirit. And what simply reminding people, and if you're new to this, it's the way of conversation that opens up the depth of our listening and our own responsiveness. And so for this session, what we invite you to is in your small groups to respond. I really invite you to somebody bring a phone to turn on, and when the 3 minutes are up for each one, to just literally have it available to be seen, simply so people know, because when we're speaking, we don't always notice the screens around us. But it's your opportunity to just what do you want to offer? What's key? Maybe 1 or 2 points that you want to offer in those 2 questions. And then the second round is, what did you hear from one another that moved you, that struck you, that resonates, that calls something in you? What did you hear from each other? Right? And again, no commentary. And you might in the beginning say, I'll go first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, so that you could just have a pause, a quieting between each one. That's how we learn to listen, by giving pause. So when everyone has completed, then another pause, first round, second round. The third round is more of an open sharing, one at a time. But what are we saying from what you heard, from what you heard from one another? What is it that you think is the key element in each of the questions that you sense your group is being invited to offer to the large group? Here you do need both a timekeeper, somebody with the phone, and then somebody to be the secretary who will at the end put it on the screen, on the chat, when we return to the large group. So we would be most grateful for your own thoughts, again, of what moved in you as you were listening. And second, what do you sense the Spirit is inviting Consecrate Life to offer at this time, right? So be gentle with yourselves in your sharing. This need not be perfect, but it need be spaces for deepening. And the timing is so that everyone is heard and has an equal time. So it might be 2 or 3 minutes, and then 2 minutes for the second round, and then a few minutes. So we will have 30 minutes for this sharing. So I thank you, and blessed encounters with one another in your small groups. Thank you, Gianluca, and thank you, Giacomo. Thank you, Gianluca, for bringing us in.
If there's people who would like to go to the group, please you open your microphone and you ask us.
In French. Merci.
Yeah, I was asked to read in French. Would you like me to?
Merci.
OK. Alors, un groupe, le chemin synodal est en train de se faire.
The synodal pathway is being developed in joy, in hope, and we have to see how from the consecrated life, we have to digest this document and study the different stages. As consecrated life, we believe that the richness of the different charisms is something to be made as a contribution by all those who participate in the synodal pathway, which is a common experience. We want to make a contribution to evangelical audacity, and we want to involve everybody, all the people of the church, of consecrated life, to dare to go in the opposite direction. Another group said that the mission is Christ's mission, not our mission. We would like to live with him in today's world. For this Kairos, for this moment of Kairos, may this synod allow us to listen to the world with his ears, and amongst us, we have to cater for everybody. Another group stressed that we would like to walk, to journey together and help the others to be on the same road together, despite all our differences. We are called upon to conversion, to openness, to become aware. We are called upon not to be afraid. We are called upon to bear witness. We are called upon to unity and to change in our mindsets. Thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, each one, and to the groups. And we will be gathering these insights also. I want to, at this moment, just give thanks, first of all, to our brother, Giacomo. Thank you for, knowing Anna was sick and being willing to offer an overview of the document, and then reminding us that it's always about being missionary disciples in this. And then inviting us to look at the invitation that the church has been called to in this next phase of the journey, of our synodal journey. And I invite all of you during Advent to consider that as one of your Advent readings or practices and prayers, to just read through reflectively what's being invited, the documents. There's a letter to the people of God, some wonderful videos that go with it as well. And then during the Christmas season, just two groups that you might have a conversation with about, so what has been your involvement or the synod, or are you in any conversations? And maybe we might be. So we bring that piece of just that energy of the call of the church at this point. It's really to all of us. And we'll be doing more in the 2024 with the next steps on the synodal journey as church, and then also as consecrated life, as religious. And so we'll make sure you get a copy of this, the recording of this and last week. And then also in the new year, we will be inviting the next steps. But we also invite you to ponder, what's the call right now? What is it that religious life is invited to contribute at this moment because of our own story and history and present? And what's inviting us to probe further for our own learning? If the church is being involved to look again, so are we as members of the church in a particular form of life, consecrated life. So I thank you, all of you who are with us live, and then we'll also be watching the recording to this invitation as well. And I want to thank our tech team, all of our interpreters. It's always a blessing, and you realize we do nothing without one another. And so thank you to you as well. And we wish you Advent blessings in abundance, and Christmas peace and new life, and a way forward as we continue to walk together. So thank you for being with us, and have a good morning, afternoon, evening, and sleep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Buon Natale a tutte. Joyeux Noël.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
You as well, Giacomo. Thank you. Thank you. And we'll tell Anna you did all that you could in all of this, and we'll have Anna another time.
I missed her, but she's worth listening to. Yes.
Yeah.
You're both worth. Thank you. Thank you.
Buon Natale. Happy
Buon
Christmas.
Natale. Yes,
Buon Natale.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas, everyone.